In this video today, I'll show you how much freedom do you have when writing ISO 27001 policies and procedures, meaning how much can you actually adapt them for your company, and also how a software called Conformio can help you with writing these documents. And the problem is that ISO 27001 does not specify the contents of particular policies and procedures. So the question is, how do you ensure that you cover everything important in documents like backup policy or incident response procedure, and at the same time have the ability to actually adapt these documents for the specifics of your company? And I'll show you now an example of one document and how you can actually balance these things. Okay, I'm showing you now this backup policy templates from Conformio ISO 27001 software. And basically to achieve this kind of a balance, you need a template that has at least, I would say, three main features. The first one is actually to give you the structure on how to write the document. The second one to actually give you the ability to change anything according to your needs. And the third one is to give you guidance on what you should or could fill into this document. So let's see first about the structure. So let me give you the table of contents. So for example, this backup policy has some general sections like purpose, scope and users, reference documents, and then the main section about the backup, and also then about managing records and validity and document management. Of course, this part about the backup is the most important. So a backup plan, restoration procedures, backup protection, operational procedures, logging, testing backup copies. So the point being here is that you should try to keep actually these sections because they provide you with the best practices on what this kind of a document should contain. So when you scroll further, you will see actually the elements here. So the backup plan should have some kind of a table which defines, what you will back up, what kind of data you have, the frequency, retention, and so on. And then restoration procedures, backup protection, and so on. So basically this is the first part, that you have the structure. The second point is that you have actually the ability to change anything. So for example, let's say that for logging, you simply want another procedure to be used, and then you can simply change this whole section saying logging is prescribed through the logging procedure. Okay, so again, it's important that you actually have the ability to change things in the way you want. And the third thing is that you have the guidance that actually tell you what you can do if you're not sure what you need to do. For example, here, restoration procedures, you should enter some kind of a job title that is in charge of restoration. And if you're not sure who this could be, actually here you have a comment and it says who is in charge of defining the rules for backup restoration. This could be typically the main person in charge of IT, like example, CTO, head of IT department. And then you can simply delete this comment if you don't need it anymore, and you can insert actually the person that you would like to insert. So let's say CTO. And basically through these, let's say, three things, you actually achieve that you balance, that you cover everything that is important, and at the same time adapt the document for your specific needs. Okay, let's go now through a couple of most common questions when writing these documents. How detailed should the documents be? The length of the document should primarily depend on two factors: how big your company is and how complex it is. So for larger companies, more complex companies, it will be longer, whereas for smaller companies, companies that are not as complex, then they can be shorter. And since Conformio is focused on smaller companies, let's say companies between 2 and 200 employees, you will see that these documents are typically shorter. So for example, here you can see that basically everything about backup fits into maybe 1 or 2 pages. So nothing else is needed here. Of course, if this was about the backup policy for a large international bank, then you will probably have 10 or 15 pages here. Another question is what happens to documents if some controls are not applicable? This backup policy actually covers only one control. This is 8.13, but some other documents could actually cover several controls in one document. And in this case, you would actually have separate sections of the document dedicated to particular controls. And then you can simply exclude control from a particular document by simply deleting the whole section. Now in Conformio, in these other policies and procedures, you can actually see comments that mark the whole section, and basically they say you can delete this section if this particular control is not applicable. And another question is how do you know what is mandatory and what is not? So what you can delete from the documents and what you need to leave as part of these documents. Well, the good thing is that ISO 27001 does not prescribe the contents of these documents, except in actually 2 cases. So there is a prescribed structure for the top-level information security policy and for a statement of applicability. But for other documents, you're actually free to adapt the contents according to your needs. But in general, it is recommended that you actually keep these sections, that you do not delete them, again, unless you have some control that is not applicable. But in other case, keep these sections and then basically adapt this text, make it shorter, make it longer, but keep the section as it is. And in any case, in Conformio, you will see for each document, it will actually notify you through these comments if something is mandatory that you have to keep in a particular document. And also a question, what is the best way to customize documents for specific circumstances in the company? The best way to personalize or customize your document is actually to adapt it for your specific people, processes, and technology. So let's start first with the technology. So here you actually have to define the plan for your particular server. So let me get rid of this comment here, and you can actually write this that you have, I don't know, some kind of server for documents, let's say on box.com, and that you have, let's say, a server for images on Amazon AWS. Okay, so this way you actually adapt the document for your specific technologies. Now let's go for people. As I've shown you earlier, you can actually adapt the document for a particular job title in a company who needs to do something. And here you can actually see how you can adapt the document for your specific process. So let's say here is the process that the responsible persons listed in the backup plan will monitor the execution of the backup and address the failures. So let's say that I want to change this process into something else and notify the CTO, who will decide on the further steps. So it's a very easy, let's say, way to adapt a particular process for something that is already existing in your company. And another common question is how do you write documents that the employees in your company will really follow? One of the most important methods to actually achieve that is that you write documents that really do make sense for your company, that you're not simply creating some hypothetical document that doesn't make sense. And for that purpose, it's always important to send these documents for a review to the persons who will actually execute this document on a daily basis. So in this case, these would be system administrators, the CTO, or anyone else actually that is mentioned here in this particular document. And actually here in Conformio, it's very easy to do this. Once you complete this first initial draft of the document, then you can actually send it for review by clicking this button, and then you will choose which users you will want this document to be sent to, and then they will actually provide their comments, and then you can actually improve this document in such a way. Also, a common question is what format should you use for your documents? First of all, regarding the structure, you should follow this structure that you have this purpose, scope, and users, and then reference documents, and then the main part of the document, whatever the document covers. And then at the end, you have these managing records, basically where you show all the records that are created because of this document, and then validity and document management. So as long as you follow this structure of these 5 sections in all of your documents, you will actually follow this best practice that most auditors and most companies prefer. Now, when it comes to file format, it doesn't really matter if you're using Microsoft Word or a Notion document or a Confluence document or a built-in online editor like this in Conformio, as long as actually you can make this document uneditable once you approve it and send it into production, meaning that all the employees now have to start complying. And here in Conformio, we actually have this button submit for approval, and once the CEO or someone in charge of your company approves this document, then it cannot be edited anymore, and it will be read-only for all the employees. Of course, if you're the owner of this document, then you can create a new version of this document which will become editable so that you can update this document later on. And finally, a question is how do you show compliance during the certification audit? Basically, at the certification audit, you have to show evidence to the auditor that you are actually performing activities that you have specified here in this document. And this is where this section 4 is really important, because it actually specifies all the records that you will create as a consequence of the activities. So for example, here you will have these logs of executing the backup, and here actually it says exactly where this is stored. Also records of backup testing, again, where you're keeping these records. So it becomes very easy for you actually to find these records whenever an auditor asks you. Just to summarize, as you can see, having this balance between flexibility and guidance is actually crucial for writing good ISO 27001 documents. Okay, hope this was helpful, and let me know in the comments below if you have any questions on how to write ISO 27001 documents, and I'll respond as quick as I can. And to access this Conformio software that I was showing you, click the link in the description below and you'll be able to open a 14-day free trial account where you can actually test out all these features and all the documents within Conformio. And see also my next video that gives you a detailed overview of how you can use Conformio software. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel not to miss any of my new videos, and I publish videos about cybersecurity, compliance and governance every week. Thanks for watching.